On January 20th, the 8th meeting of the so-called Contact Group on Defense Assistance to Ukraine was held at the U.S. military base in Ramstein, Germany. The results of this meeting unequivocally testify to the complete irresponsibility of the West and its desire for a further escalation of the conflict. NATO countries have confirmed that they will increase the supply of modern heavy offensive weapons to Kyiv. They do not feel sorry for anyone on the territory of Ukraine. Now it is already clear that they also do not feel sorry for their own citizens. Tanks don't arrive on their own. They need not only to be managed, but they also need to be maintained. Moreover, such tanks were not previously in service with Ukraine. Accordingly, this issue somehow had to be resolved by the Ramstein Group. Well, I can say that those who will go as part of these battalions, brigades from the persons accompanying these tanks, they should know what fate their governments have prepared for them on the example of citizens of their own countries and, unfortunately, citizens of Ukraine, which, all the more, no one regrets in the West. I am not talking about the Zelensky regime. The West relied on them as cannon fodder. The Secretary General of the Alliance, I mean NATO, Stoltenberg said that this structure, this military political union, although it seems to me that the word political is a rudiment, we need to get rid of it, because it is a military bloc. Stoltenberg said that NATO is not sending soldiers and aircraft to Ukraine, and it is not going to become a belligerent. It is clear that we immediately comment on such statements. We give explanations and our official position. I have a question for Stoltenberg. Do you really consider citizens of EU and NATO countries to be uniform idiots? Do you really think that by sending tanks to be serviced by people, forming, among other things, on the basis of Ukrainian embassies abroad, recruiting centers for recruiting both citizens of Ukraine and citizens of other countries, you are still not a party to the conflict? Who are you then? Name it. Just think of a new name for yourself. Self-identification is required if you are not a party to the conflict. Another moment. You still work with each other? Develop unity in your assessments. Or is Germany no longer a member of NATO? The German foreign minister said that it turns out that European countries and, of course, Germany are at war with Russia. How can you fight with someone without being a party to the conflict? What are these new political science evasions? Who are you trying to fool with this? You have been deceiving the people of Ukraine for many years, dragging them into a confrontation with Russia in order to use them as a tool. You deceived your negotiating partners. Let's remember the recent revelations of Merkel, who said that they were not going to follow the negotiation path, and they needed time to, as she said, make Ukraine stronger. We now understand that they did not make it stronger, but they simply stuffed it with weapons in order to completely destroy Ukraine. Whom is NATO going to deceive further? Their citizens? Citizens of NATO countries should know that their bloc will be fully involved in the confrontation with our country. And this confrontation is on the rise. We will not analyze now. This is a matter for the military regarding the effectiveness of what is happening now in the supply of tanks, and so on. It seems to me that instead of the word efficiency, they are much more concerned with the word showiness. It seems that these words were similar. Maybe the root is the same. I don't know how it sounds in their languages, but the essence is different. Yes, there is an effect. Europe shook, although they are trying to calm it down. It's just supposedly their solidarity and support. And of course, they allegedly are not a party to the conflict. But people who have gone through various historical events understand what is at stake, and they understand where they are drawing Europe into. But there is an effect. Is there any efficiency? Or will they measure it in terms of the number of victims? So, all the statements that were made by the NATO Secretary General were crossed out by the German Foreign Minister A Berbock. Speaking on January 25th, not somewhere in the media where her opinion could be considered as her personal point of view, but speaking at the Council of Europe, officially representing her country at such a high level that was entrusted to her. She called a spade and directly said, verbatim quote, "We are at war against Russia." The direct involvement of Washington in the management of the Ukrainian army was also recognized by President Biden. I leave it to the judgment of the experts, mostly in the field of medicine, to what extent he gave an account in his statements. This is not our issue. But he said it, and it has not yet been refuted by a team of his press secretaries, specialists in special communications. So, he said, he even announced that with the approach of spring, a counteroffensive of Ukraine would take place. Who decides what happens in Kiev? We understand that not Zelensky, although he pretends to make those decisions. No, the President of the United States of America has just spoken about what awaits him in the spring. It is obvious that a new batch of weapons from the U.S. in the amount of $2.5 billion is called upon to help him in this. It included armored vehicles, artillery and ammunition. The gathering in Ramstein gave rise to the formation of the so-called tank coalition. All those who brewed this mess in Ukraine have long dreamed of it. Its creation was demanded by the most frenzied Western hawks. And, of course, Kiev. They are in the same chain. They have a real conspiracy on a global scale to share the funds that are allegedly allocated to them for upholding democracy. Then everything just burst, and the whole world saw this terrible network. This is not even corruption, but this is some kind of terrible network for dividing colossal funds. If the President of the U.S. knows what the Kiev regime will do in the spring in a few months, then did he not in the White House guess where the money and funds sent to the Kiev regime go? He didn't just guess. This is an international level scheme for the withdrawal of funds and for their distribution among the participants in this terrible, hellish, bloody chain. Let me remind you, regarding this tank coalition, that the foundation was laid by London, which had previously promised to provide Kiev with 14 Challenger 2 tanks. On January 25th, the US and the FRG followed suit, announcing a decision to add several tank battalions, with American Abrams tanks and German Leopard tanks. At the same time, Berlin allowed NATO partners to re-export Leopard tanks to Ukraine. So, you are still not a party to the conflict? I will say it again. Please state the unanimous opinion of NATO on this matter. Stop this dissonance and stop brainwashing people, substituting concepts, throwing in new terms every day. Tell it like it is. On January 26th, Zelensky, commenting on the upcoming deliveries of tanks, categorically stated that now Kiev would demand from the Allies to transfer combat aircraft and long-range missiles to him. Well, it's usually not the parties to the conflict who usually do this. Those who do not participate in hostilities, right? I emphasize that the armored vehicles sent to Ukraine are intended for offensive combat operations. The administration of the President of the United States does not hide the fact that the new supplies are designed to contribute, as they say, to the liberation of Ukrainian territories, including Crimea. No, Crimea is not Ukrainian territory. This is the territory of Russia. It was, it is, and it will be. Podolyak, advisor to the head of the office of the President of Ukraine, echoes the American masters. He's not fired yet. I don't know what their plans are. He did everything there that he needed. Whether they will let him crawl away or they will throw him out, we don't know. We'll see. He is still the head of the office. He argues that the appearance of 300 to 400 Western tanks at the front would make it possible to proceed to the final stage of the war and engage in the deoccupation of the country. Seriously? I understand that everything that people around Zelensky say cannot be taken seriously. His illness is contagious. But not all of this is for TikTok users. There are people who really understand the strategy, tactics of military operations. Earlier, he announced his intention to use NATO weapons for attacks on Moscow, St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg and other Russian cities. All this is another evidence of the intention of the West to raise the stakes in the conflict, which leads to its prolongation and an increase in casualties. I hear various epithets about this. I will say it again. In my opinion, everything is obvious and very clear here. There has been no talk of any defense of Ukraine for a long time. Kiev and its NATO handlers are ready to do anything to inflict maximum damage on our country. We would like to reiterate that any Western weaponry that ends up in Ukraine becomes a legitimate target for the Russian armed forces. I say this just in case, so that there are no questions later. The supply of tanks will not change the situation in favor of the Kiev regime, but they bring the Western countries to a new level of confrontation with our country and our people.
Dear friends, if you like this video, please subscribe, like and write a comment. This will greatly help the development of this channel. Thank you.